What's up guys, welcome back to Real Talk, and yes, you join me in yet another video of me and my BMW M2, but more specifically I'm going to be talking about what the fuel consumption's like and what to expect coming from an M140i or a 240i to an M2, because I have had a lot of questions regarding that. Now just before I do say anything, I have noticed on all my intros, when I do it on this camera and put it through to my laptop, my voice goes really deep, and I don't know how to fix that. That's not how I sound in real life. You'll see from the next clips what my normal voice is like, because a lot of people are like, bro, your voice is well deep, you know. It's like, yeah, it's not. And yes, I know there is let's address the elephant in the room. There is a Christmas tree in the background. I know it's not Christmas, but it's lockdown, so might as well bring a bit of excitement to our lives where we can. So anyway, that was the missus's doing, not mine. So a lot of the questions I get are, you know, I've got an M140, Chris, or I've got a 240, and I'm looking at getting an M2 or a similar kind of M car. What's the fuel consumption like? And it's hard to answer that question. So I thought I'd actually, do you know what? I'd reset my trip computer. I'll go for a drive. You know, a bit of B roads, a bit of town driving, a bit of motorway, and just see what the average is and drive it how I normally drive it. Go for like a 20-25 mile drive and see what the average is, and just talk a little bit about the differences between the M2 and the M140 240 as well. So one thing to note is, yes, naturally it's not going to be as good on fuel, but this should obviously help those people who are looking at getting cars, because they're like, you know, I do a lot of driving, I'm concerned about the MPG. So yes, it will completely vary on how you drive the car, but for my kind of driving, this is what I'll average. So have your guesses now in the comments, and let's see how far off you are or how close you are. But without further ado, let's jump straight into the video.
Okay, so you join me in the M2, and as I kind of said in the intro, this main video is just going to be on the comparison of kind of fuel consumption and running costs compared to like an M140 or an M240i, because a lot of people have been asking me on my videos, on Instagram, well, you know, what's the difference like in fuel between the two? Because naturally, from an M140 or from a 240, the next jump is an M2 or some kind of M car. So, and I know that's quite a big factor in people deciding whether or not to go ahead or not. So I thought, do you know what, let's just do a normal kind of drive of a bit of, you know, town driving, a bit of B roads and some dual carriageway, and see what kind of average consumption that we get. So what I'll do is I'll reset the typical computer here. I'll drive it in a normal kind of mode that I'll drive it in. It's normally sport that I'm in, or I do it in traction mode or sport plus, just to get some more burbles and things like that. And hopefully let's see what kind of average consumption we get, and hopefully it answers any kind of questions, because I get all figures of figures until you actually drive it. So I thought there's no really better way to experiment it than going for just a normal kind of drive anyway. So just town driving at first. I'm leaving the car in sport mode for now. When I flick through the modes, I'll let you know, but we'll probably do like a 20 mile kind of drive just to see how it fares. Now, one thing straight away upon getting this car was I noticed that the tank, in terms of when I first filled it up, I only get like 200 miles to a tank, and if I drove it really civilised, 250 at a push. Whereas the M140, you're easily getting 250, 300 miles out of a tank if you're just driving it like normally. Whereas this, you have to really be conscious of how you're driving it to get 250 miles out of the tank. So that's the first thing that I noticed. Tank size, I believe, is the same. M2 is the same engine. That's what's in an M135. Okay, so not an M140, M135. There are obviously a few tweaks to it. The engine, the breathing mods as well, a little bit more, you know, brake horsepower, and of course the exhaust system from an M4, M3. So that does make the fuel a little bit worse. And naturally with that, because it's an M car, as we all know, M cars, they love a DCT, so dual clutch. That's only 7-speed, what you need to remember. So the actual gearbox itself isn't as smooth as what the likes of an M140 or 240s would be either. So getting up the gears takes a little bit longer when you're just driving in auto, and it holds the gears a little bit longer even when you're in comfort in this car. So again, naturally the M140s or the B50, as opposed to saying M140 and 240s, I was just going to say B58 engines, they are going to be a little bit better on fuel, especially on long drives, because you can just whack it in 8th gear and not worry about it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just drive first of acceleration, because that's normally what I do sometimes if there's like an echo, so just give it a bit of a build up and then floor it kind of thing, just to kind of get some noises out of the exhaust, or when you're driving past people and want to show off. No, I'm only messing, don't do that. So it's still on some like 30-mile-an-hour roads at the minute. Still in sport. I'm in about 3rd, 4th gear. Car would probably allow me to go up. Like, see, 30-mile-an-hour. Car will not let me go into 5th gear. So 4th gear is the best that we can really do. So since we've reset it, we've not done many miles, to be honest. We've done like 2 miles, and we are averaging 19 miles to the gallon. Okay. So what we'll do to kind of average that out now is we're picking up to a national speed limit country road. Again, leaving it in sport. And this is how I drive the car. Naturally, yes, you will get better consumption if you whack it in comfort, put it in auto, you know, of course. But listen, I'm young. You don't buy an M car to dawdle about. You buy it for the sounds. You don't buy a car, first of all, like this, if you're worried about the fuel, because it's not going to be great. Give it a bit of a punch. Now, the one thing that you'll find with the M cars, so let's just say you've jumped from an M240 or an M140 up to an M2, the main thing that you'll find different is the gearbox, okay? Yes, because it is completely different, but the gear changes are a lot more aggressive, to the point I thought something was wrong with the car. So I thought, bloody hell, the second to, especially in Sport Plus, the second from 3rd gear is so aggressive, but those are just obviously the traits of the DCT naturally. But it is, when you're on it, it is a very, very good gearbox. Now the thing is with this car, I find myself not driving it as quickly as I did the M140, just because I put it in traction mode and just bang down the gears just to hear the burbles and that, which I think's, you know, kind of normal in a way. I find myself not driving this as quick, but because I'm constantly driving around town and up built up areas, I'm always dropping down gears, which of course isn't good for the fuel, which it just makes it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But you find yourself doing that more in this. You find yourself wanting to make noises, although you're not driving fast and not on it, which are just naturally going to drop it down. So we've done obviously some country lanes, done a bit of B road. We're now on a dual carriageway. So what I'm going to do is naturally I'll stick it into comfort, put it into auto now, and just cruise by. Now, one thing to note: this is now a 50 going down to a 30. So that I didn't plan for that, so I do apologise. But average consumption now is still around 19. Probably built back up a bit, but obviously just flooring it back onto the dual carriageway there has probably reduced it ever so slightly as well. So I'd like to think at the end of this we're probably at like high 20s, and comparing that to the M140, let's be honest, my M140, no word of a lie here, I have managed on a 50 mile an hour stretch. Remember, I stuck it in cruise control and I was doing 56 behind the lorry the whole time, and I actually got 52 to the gallon, which is just, it's mad. And that's why we all love these cars, the M140s and C40s, because they're absolute weapon when you wanted to drive them. They were great fun, but on the flip side, they were also really good on fuel for what they were. And, you know, an average kind of day in the M140 for me, I'd probably average, you know, mid-20s, high 20s, easily. Very, very easily. And if I really wanted to put my head to it, I could get into, you know, the 30s, 35s, 40s with ease. But with this, I have really struggled to get it into the 40s. But like I kind of said at the beginning, this car is very much, it's okay fuel consumption or bad. If you are really on it with this, you will get into single figures quite easily as well. Quite easily, you know. And if you're just driving around town normally, you probably get, you know, low 20s at best. Whereas the M140, I really pushed my first M140. I took it to the ring. I done a quick lap time for what it was. I think it was like 8 minutes 26 or something like that. You can see that on my channel, by the way. I'll put a little thing here. But still, with that, I still didn't get into single figures. So I dare to think what kind of consumption this would get if I'd done the exact same. There's a little bump there. But what I mean about the gear changes, you have to be mega careful with the gear changes. not too bad. And I've been hooning it a little bit. So again, we'll pop it back into comfort, into auto, and just let it sit for a little bit. So it's 50 mile an hour again down here. Well, it's actually gone down to 30 again. So getting to the end of that kind of dual carriageway stunt there. I was doing that for about 3-4 miles, and that has now brought the average consumption up to 22 to the gallon, and that was 50s, 30s at some, you know, you saw when I joined the dual carriageway and leaving the roundabout. Now we're pulling back off now into, oh, this road's a bit bad, into kind of rural areas. Okay, so built up 30 mile an hour, start stop traffic, and see what the average is. And obviously you guys would then be able to say, well, actually, because the common question I'm asked is, what is it like to the M140? I've got one at the minute, and I drive this amount of time to work, this amount of miles, just umming and ahhing because I don't want to be paying too much for fuel. That is generally the kind of question that I get. It's kind of orientated around that. Look, if you're driving on the motorway with this, it's not going to be as good, okay? But in any aspect, it's not going to be as good as an M140 or 240 in terms of fuel. But you know, is it really bad? No, you will get 30s to the gallon if you're just sticking on the motorway doing the speed limit, of course. But round town, you probably wouldn't see out of the 20s. If I'm being realistic, I would say mid 20s at a push if you're driving round town, and then start stop in the morning in that. If the car's cold as well, low 20s quite easily. That would be my kind of verdict on it. So hopefully this kind of answered any questions that you have about the consumption. The idea was to actually try and get an M140 out and do the exact same drive and see what the comparison would be, which I will probably try and do in the future, but obviously everything is going down at the moment. I didn't want to really, I didn't want to take the mick of it, to be fair. Just for instance, I like doing stuff like this where you leave it in second and build up the roads and then lift off, and it lets off a dirty little like noise. Sometimes when it's hot, it pops as well. So that naturally, like I said, I'm only doing 30 mile an hour, but that is going to bring your fuel down, and you'll find yourself doing this a lot more than you usually would because of the noise. But yeah, so to conclude then, really, I have averaged over the last 20-23 miles, this is saying, obviously I've not shown you the whole drive because it would bore the death out of you. I've averaged 22.3 to the gallon, and that's just an average kind of driving, being a bit footed. Obviously, if you were really careful and just left it in comfort everywhere, you are going to get more, and depending on the driving that you do, it is going to change, and who you are individually as well. But that's the kind of theme. I think a drive like that in my M140 probably would have seen high 20s, low 30s possibly. So yeah, it's not as good, to be fair. But if you guys want to see more videos on the M2 and comparing things to the M140, because I was looking for videos when I was looking at changing, and there wasn't really too much out there. So anything that you have, just drop me a comment. Don't forget to obviously like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.